talking about a song that I wrote called Enough. And I would tell a little, I'll tell just a little bit about that particular song. My wife and I were actually sitting on the patio one summer morning, and we were just talking about the way the enemy attacks us
Mhm.
and how we typically just take it. We just take it. We let him do his thing. We let him get us down. We let him beat us up. And as we were sitting there talking about it, I was getting more angry and angry,
Mhm.
really with myself. But I have to realize that I'm a child of God, that my wife is a child of God. So we're not going to beat ourselves up, but we needed to recognize what the enemy's doing. And that's
Mhm.
where we came up with the song Enough. That's
I was in a codependent relationship for 5 years. Throughout the relationship, I felt extremely alone and abandoned many times. Um, the only thing that I knew to do was to pray, work out, and keep my eyes on God. Those are the only things that I knew how to do in order to make it through those dark moments. So the day things like hit rock bottom in that relationship, I found myself alone, living in a new state where I didn't know anyone. I didn't have my own place to stay because asking God, like, how could you allow this to happen to me? Like, I'm a good person. Like, I looked out for this person, and how could you possibly let all of this happen to me in this moment? But then I realized that, okay, with my studying of my word and knowing my word, I'm like, okay, this isolation has to mean something because I'm away from family. I'm away from anybody that can be my crutch. And I realized that he just wanted me to trust him wholeheartedly, completely. And that was something that I always overrode. Like, I've always heard his voice. I always felt his presence. And I always overrode. I always came up with an excuse why something else could be something else, because not realizing I don't have control. Even though I want the control, I
Mhm.
don't have control. And that was like my biggest thing to give up because I was a teenage parent. So being responsible for somebody else, I always felt like, okay, I'm in control. I have to be control. I have to. Then I realized, and I was like, no, I'm not alone because God here with me, because he's helping me push through this to get up every day to do this.
Mhm.
absolutely.
Mhm.
And that and when I experienced that in the gym, I really understood. My grandmother used to always pray with us the footprints in the sand prayer.
Mm.
Love that one.
I
Yeah, that's a good one.
never understood what that meant, right? And it took me until that moment.
I picked Enough because it speaks to my life in a nutshell. It took me over 30 plus years to find my enough.
Mm,
So when I finally found it, and discovering who I was on the other side of it, it really transformed my life. So when I heard your song Enough, it spoke to the healing that I experienced in that transformation, and to how we tend to get boggled down with the enemy and what he's doing to us, when all we have to believe is that God got us and that we're enough. So
that's
that's
right.
why I chose the song. My God story. Ooh, it has layers. It has layers. But my story is a story of overcoming suicide, of overcoming depression and post traumatic stress. And this is all because of trauma sexual rape, that I experienced as a child. And I experienced multiple rapes.
Mm,
So this is where I lost my sense of self. I lost who I felt like was me, at a young age before I really even found who I was. So losing your identity before you even know what identity is can be more traumatizing than you realize. But overcoming suicide, I was in a mental home 3 separate times for suicide attempts.
mm,
I struggled 30 plus years with suicide and depression. And
wow.
it wasn't until I learned to forgive myself, like she was saying. It wasn't until I learned to forgive myself for giving up on myself. It wasn't until I learned to forgive God for what I felt like when I felt like he forgave, I mean, not forgave, but forgot about me. You know, it wasn't until I forgave others and let go of the pain of yesterday. You know, it wasn't until I just shed all of that weight. It wasn't until all of that was done that I truly learned what enough looked like for me. You know, not what it looked like to everybody else,
Right.
what it looked like for me. Um, and that's what made me write the book. You know, the hunt for enough is truly what it means, the hunt, because I was searching for so long to find out who Shantae was. I had an alter ego. I was leaning and depending on people to pull me out, you know, but you don't really find out how strong you are until you're stripped of everybody you feel that keeps you strong, you know. So it wasn't until I was alone, you know, in the hospital for days and weeks on end by myself, trying to renew my mind and trying to battle against the enemy. I mean, because it's so hard to find life for yourself after you've tried to kill yourself more times than you can
Mm,
count.
mm,
You
mm,
know, you're cursing God for waking you up the next day. You know, so having to reframe my mind, you know, having to reframe those negative beliefs into positive affirmations that would
yeah.
give my life meaning and purpose, learning to forgive people, learning to figure out and discover what my why is and what that looks like for me and how to lean into other people so I can forget about what I'm going through. You know, that's what it took for me to really find my enough. And I'm just hoping that anybody who reads the book will get to see and go through that same healing journey that I went through. You know, but that's what it took. And I'm just inspired and grateful to be here to be able to share my story, hoping that other people can find themselves in it somewhere.
It is going to be so helpful and hopeful for so many people. You know, as I talk with both of you, you know, unfortunately, and I think this is a Phyllis thing. I mentioned this to Phyllis, and she says that's what I use too. But our pain
Hmm.
should not be wasted.
Yes.
And because the things that we've learned from that, from being homeless,
Hmm.
from going through the trauma that you went through, and other things I'm sure, Katera, that you've gone through, and things that I've gone through. These things, if we keep them to ourselves and take them to our grave, nobody else can learn from them. Everybody, everybody who goes through these things that hears these stories realizes, as I listen to Shantae, as I listen to Katera, there's hope. Oh, I can relate to that.
Hmm.
And it's so helpful. When we're vulnerable, this is a vulnerable moment. And
Hmm.
and I really appreciate it.